Alrighty, so for this video, we're going to go ahead and talk about ordering decimals from least to greatest. And the best thing you can do is change them all to the same form. So what that means is you're either changing them all to percents, either all to decimals, or all to fractions. Personally, I would recommend changing them all to percents, but it's totally your choice. You can change them all to decimals, or you can change them all to fractions, just whichever one you're most comfortable with. I would also, the next thing you need to remember is that when ordering from least to greatest, that the word least means smallest, and the word greatest means biggest. And that when a negative number is closer to 0, it means it's bigger. Okay, so that means negative 1/2 is bigger than negative 2 1/2. Okay, because negative 1/2 is closer to 0. So we're going to go ahead and just try this example right here. Notice that we have some fractions, some decimals, some percents. Again, your best choice is to change them all into the same form. Change them all to decimals, change them all into percents, whatever you want. Okay? So right here we have 0 and negative 0 and 1200ths. I'm going to change all of these into percents. And how we change a decimal into a percent, we learned this back in Unit 10, is we just multiply by 100. It puts that disguise on, which would give us negative 12%. Okay, so we have negative 12%. And then how we change a fraction into a percent, first we need to change it into a decimal. How we change a fraction into a decimal is we just divide. Remember, that's what that fraction bar means. So we're going to do negative 3 divided by 2, which will give us negative 1/2. And then we multiply that by 100, and that will give us our percent, which is negative 150%. This one is already a percent, so we don't need to change it. So is this one, but we do need to change these last two. Again, how we change a fraction. I'm going to want to change it into a decimal first by first dividing the top by the bottom. 3 divided by 2 gives us 1.5. Multiply that by 100, and we get 150%. This is a decimal, so all we need to do is just multiply it by 100, and we get 30%. Okay? So now that I have all of these turned into percents, we got 12%, negative 150%, 120%, negative 60%, 150%, and 30%. We are going to change all of these into we've changed them all, now we need to order them. Okay? So remember, with negatives, the farther away from 0 it is, the smaller it is. So our furthest negative away from 0 is going to be this one right here. This is our furthest negative from 0, so that's going to be our smallest number. So we're going to have negative 3/2 as our first one, and whenever I use it, I'm going to cross it off. So that way I know what I've used and what I still need to use. It looks like our next negative percent is going to be negative 60%. And then we'd have negative 12%. Negative 0 and 1200ths. Okay, so we got those. Now we're looking at our positives, which we got 120, 150, and 30. So next would come 30%, which is 0 and 3/10. Next would come our 120%. Then lastly, we have our positive 150%, which was just 3/2. And that's how we order it from least to greatest. Let's go ahead and try one more. For this one, we have 33% and negative 30% already. So I just need to change these ones right here because those ones are not percents yet. So I'm going to go ahead and change this one. Remember, we're just going to divide. So when we divide negative 1 by 3, we get negative 0 and 3/10 repeating. And then when we multiply that by 100, we get 33 and 3/10 repeating percent. Okay. Then we have same thing. This is just positive 1/3, so it's going to be the exact same thing. We divide, multiply by 100. It's only just going to be positive instead of negative. Sorry, I'm not sure why that just closed for some reason. Hold on. Let's go back to here. Oh, it changed the color. Hold on just a second. Okay, so this would be, give me 0 and 3/10 repeating, multiply that by 100, and we get positive 33 and 3/10 repeating percent. This one's already decimal, so we can just multiply it by 100, and we get 30%. So all of these percents are very similar, so it might be a little bit tricky, but we can do it. Okay, so again, first we're going to look for our smallest negative. Okay, in this case, it's the furthest one away from 0. This is farther away from 0 than 30. So negative 33 is farther away than 30 out of our two negatives. So that means this one right here is going to be our smallest one. So we got negative 1/3 first. And then it would go our other negative, which is going to be negative 30%. Now we need to look at our positives. With our positives, we got 30%, 33.3 repeating percent, and 33%. Okay. Next is going to be 30%. But then the question is going to be, which one comes next? The 33% or the 33 and 3/10 repeating percent? And the answer is that this one right here, because it has the repeating decimal, is going to be bigger than just normal 33. So 33% would come next, and then it would be the 33 and 3/10 repeating percent next, which is positive 1/3. Okay, that repeating decimal is bigger, but only when they're the same number. Okay, so say you had 19 and 5/10 repeating versus 20. This one is not going to be bigger just because it has a repeating decimal. 20 is bigger than 19. 20 is still bigger. It's only bigger if it's the same number. So if we had 19 versus 19 and 5/10 repeating, even if it was 19 and 5/10, because this one is repeating, this one is bigger, okay? It's got that repeating decimal and they're the same number. So that one's bigger. Alrighty. So that's how we order decimals from least to greatest. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about PEMDAS. With PEMDAS, we want to remember that P stands for parentheses, E stands for exponents, M stands for multiplying, D stands for dividing, A stands for adding, and then S stands for subtracting. Okay? Remember always to do this order. Remember that multiplication and division go from left to right, and so does adding and subtracting. We want to make sure we do these two from left to right, and then these two from left to right, that they can switch order. Okay? With this first problem right here, I'm going to go ahead and do those parentheses first. So I'm going to do 3/2 plus 5%. Go ahead and type that into your calculator. Remember, we cannot type percents directly. We need to plug in the decimal form. Okay, so this is what I'm going to plug into my calculator. I'm going to plug in 3/2. I'm going to add 0 and 5/100, which gives me 1 and 55/100. And then we still have this number right here on the outside. Remember, when you have a number touching parentheses, it means that you are multiplying. So we're going to want to do these two first because multiplying comes before subtracting. So we're going to multiply that by 0 and 5/10, which gives us 0 and 775 thousandths. Now we can subtract. So we subtract that 2 and 5/10, and that gives us -1 and 725 thousandths. Okay? Go ahead and try this one in your calculator. Remember that when something has an exponent, it doesn't mean that it's 1/4 multiplied by 2, it means that you have two 1/4s being multiplied by each other. So you do 1/4 multiplied by 1/4. Another thing to remember is that absolute value, although not the same as parentheses, is also involved in the parentheses group in PEMDAS. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about is percent of a number and how to deal with it in word problems. Okay, when we're dealing with word problems, remember when we dealt with, like, you had a jacket and it was $30 and your tax was 10%, and I didn't want you to find the total price, I just wanted you to find the tax. Or if you had a population of 500 and it increased by 8%, you would just multiply it by the percent, okay? Now, if it was a fraction, you would do it the exact same way. So if we had 40 of, like, what's 20% of 40, how we would do this in our calculators in Unit 10 is we would just do our percent, which we would change to a decimal, then we would multiply it by that number. Take your percent, multiply it by the number. Remember that percents are fractions and decimals. So if a word problem just gives you a fraction or a decimal instead of a percent, you solve it the exact same way. So for example, if it said half of 90, that would be the same thing as saying 50% of 90. How you're going to solve it is if it's already a fraction, you can just use the fraction. You would just do 1/2, or you can change it to a decimal and multiply it by 90, which gives you 45. You solve it the exact same way because percents are fractions and decimals. So if it gives you a fraction and a decimal, you just multiply it. 3/4 of 20, okay, means you're taking 3/4 of 20. So you would take 3/4, multiply it by 20, which gives us 15. And then same thing with this one. Even though it's a decimal, we can still use it. It says of, we're going to multiply, and then we do of 60. Plug that into our calculator, and we get 15 as well. Okay, so what does that look like when it's in a word problem? It's going to look something like this. So George had his 8 friends, and they're going to go hang out. 1/4 of his friends want to go to the park. 0 and 25/100ths of them want to go to the arcade. 50% of them want to go swimming. Okay, and the question is, how many friends want to do each activity? Which activity should they do? Like, which activity is most popular? Okay, so we need to go ahead and solve how many people are going to do each activity. First, let's do park. So we had 1/4 of them, and there's 8 friends. We multiply those together, get 1/4 of 8, which is 2. So 2 friends want to go to the park. What about the arcade? It said 0 and 25/100ths want to go to the arcade, and there's 8 friends still. So we're going to multiply that by 8, and we get 2 as well. So 2 friends would like to go to the arcade. Now what about swimming? Swimming is 50%. So we do 50% multiplied by our 8 friends. But we can't put percents directly into our calculator, so we would do it as a decimal, which is 0 and 5/10. Multiply it by 8, and we get 4. So, based on popularity, which activity should they do? They should do swimming, because most people would like to do swimming. And that is how we solve the word problems.